Hello, everyone. As of this video, we know that the new Transformer publisher has been decided, but we don't know who it is yet. All we know from Hasbro is that initial talks about the story and the creation of this new comic book series is currently underway, meaning we know, someone has it. We're just waiting to find out who. So before we get too far into it, and before we get real information about this, I thought let's go over a few things that I feel like we need in upcoming Transformer comic books in order to make sure that it's engaging and interesting again. The same way that IEDW kind of reinvented and got an audience for itself and then kind of failed to do that again when they tried a second time. I'm looking for something that does quite a bit, I will admit, but I've got a list. Let's go over it, and I'll see if you agree with me on this. Just a bit of a wish list for what I'm hoping out of the next run of Transformer comic books. And the start of it is something that Hasbro has actually stated themselves, and that is to keep the initial cast limited. One thing that got really bad in IDW is just how many characters they were using. Of course, there's hundreds of Transformer characters to use, but it doesn't necessarily mean you need to use all of them, especially when you're just starting a story out. This is a problem I had with IDW 2.0 that introduced a lot of characters from the comics previously as if you already knew them, even though it's a completely new story. Threw in a bunch of like classic characters. It threw in a ton of new characters that really didn't have much, like, I don't know. It just felt like there were so many characters to keep track of. It was hard for me to like wrap my head around the entire cast. And part of it is because of the way they set the story. But again, they didn't need to have so many. So keep it simple. I'm thinking like no more than like a cast of like 5 Autobots and 5 Decepticons at the most. And it doesn't mean you can't have more. It just means that the storyline, the drive of the comics should only focus on those, that particular cluster of characters. And then like when like when one character's story is told, you let them fade into the background for a while, and then a background character that fans have taken to or that you have a plan for comes to the forefront. So you're never focused on too many at once. In that way, you just don't lose track of who's who, what's doing what. It doesn't get bogged down and it doesn't get hard to follow, right? So I think that's step one. Keep it simple. Keep the storyline focused on just a few at a time. Now, when I say that, like, I want you to keep it to a few particular characters, I don't mean just stick to the classic legacy characters, but like I would love to see some underused characters get a chance. That was one of the biggest victories of IDW, especially in 1.0, was taking these characters who had little to no characterization at all because they never had prominent appearances in the comics or the cartoons and giving new life to them. They aren't really in defiance of their original characterization, but they are expanded upon. And that, like the origins of characters like Tailgate and Swerve are built upon to create fully fleshed out, in depth characters that you can actually get behind and connect to. And that was fantastic. That was the biggest thing to take out of IDW was how to utilize the unutilized. I want to see more of that. Your initial 5, like, if I'm choosing, my initial 5 is going to include at least one G1 character that really doesn't have any attention whatsoever, and try to do something really fun and imaginative. Try to make them the fan favorite. Put a lot of effort into making them likable and making it relatable. That way we actually have new things, even though we are still seeing an old presence. That makes sense. So, yeah, less dependence on just throwing brand new characters in, using the characters you have. In that, a lot of times, a character that is underutilized or is, just exists but doesn't really have anything behind them can absolutely be the choice instead of just throwing up somebody new. which kind of gets to another point that I wanted for this. Respect the characters you use. If you're going to throw in a character and radically change their direction or who they are, then you're just using the character for the sake of shock value. And that's never going to stand the test of time. That's never going to tell a story that fans are going to connect to. It has to be done extremely well in order for that to work. But don't just throw it in there just for the sake of, oh my God, look who's behind this. That stuff just comes across really badly, and it's going to get a backlash, like Star Saber. Star Saber is a pretty perfect example of that. And it's not even the only one. Like right now in Last Bot Standing, I don't like how they're using Override. It doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like something the character would do. So it irks me. It irks me when they kind of twist a character so far beyond what they used to be, especially when it's a character who presented something unique with their original characterization that you've now scrubbed for the sake of creating something radically different. If you've got something radically different that doesn't apply to an existing Transformer, fine. Then you can create a completely new character. But I shouldn't be reading something going, why on earth would you use this character for this role when this character exists? Or when this is so radically out of character that it's impossible for me to get behind. It's a shock value, but it's distracting at the end, and it doesn't work in the long run. So, speaking of legacy characters, please, oh please, and I know this ain't happening, but please don't make Bumblebee the lead. We've had a lot of years now of Bumblebee being just like the Autobot, the Transformer, whether it was taking up more prominence than Optimus Prime in the live-action movies, becoming leader in IDW for a time, and being a major story focus in IDW 2.0, and then we got the Machinima series that did the same. We got or rather, the Rooster Teeth series that did the same. We've got, Bumblebee, his own live-action movie. We've got Cyberverse and RID 2015. Bumblebee has had plenty of chances to be at the forefront. I think it's time to let him, be somewhere off to the side again. Not to lose complete prominence, but I like his current angle in more recent media, especially with Earthspark. Where he's kind of just a mentor to younger Autobots, where he still has this importance to him, but he still has to look up to Optimus Prime because he's trying to be a leader now, and then he still has a hero to look up to, and we can still connect to him on that, we want to be like our senpai kind of realm. That's a more comfortable fit for Bumblebee rather than just always sticking him out and being the most prominent Autobot, because when he's more down to earth, so to speak, and when he is more lower on the totem pole, he's more relatable to us. He comes across as just nicer and friendlier and more toward what his intention is supposed to be. This again goes back to respecting the characters for what they are, what they are typically. So Bumblebee doesn't have to be the focus of the entire book, though it's Transformers, he probably will be. Okay, let's get off characters. We'll look at the larger spectrum here. I want a new take on the dynamic between the Autobots and Decepticons. Okay, so we've seen ruined Cybertrons they have to escape from to find new fuel. We've seen the war on Cybertron in many different facets. We've seen it on Earth in many different facets. It's been over Energon, been over Allsparks, been over Matrix, been over Enigmas of Combination, been over a dozen different things. There are almost 4 decades worth of Transformer stories out there now. We need a new dynamic. We need a new twist. I'm going to mention Earthspark again because Earthspark actually managed to find a twist we haven't gone through yet. What is it like to be on an Earth after the Autobots and Decepticon war has already finished? That's fascinating, especially when Megatron and Decepticons are still around. All right, now you've got a new twist that's actually not only interesting to me, but also it's so simple. Why didn't we ever think of that before, right? So, there is an invert. Like what happens if the Decepticons win the war and we're looking at like Autobots who were banished from Cybertron and like if we're fighting our way back, or like we're handling things on Earth trying to make it our new home, but we've got these rogue Decepticons that are trying to take the planet, or like trying to finish the Autobots off, whatever it might be. There are other directions, and they don't even have to be wildly different directions. Not as like a shattered glass scenario, not a like crazy like like we've landed on Earth in like Pioneer days, and Optimus Prime has to turn into a covered wagon pulled by 2 oxen. Nothing like that. But something different, just something so I don't feel like I'm reading the same story all over again, right? So I need a fresh storyline. Something. I also need Earth and humans. The thing about human beings is that when we read a story, if we can relate to the setting, we can connect to it. So there's a disconnect when you set your entire story on Cybertron and we have no basis or stake in the war's outcome. So, we as Transformer fans love Cybertron, of course we do, but the stakes will never feel that high because there's no human presence, there's no Earth presence to it, so we can't equate it to like our own mindscape, if that makes any sense. Also, the dynamic between Transformer and human has always been an interesting one in media that I really feel like has been improperly used over the years, especially recently. This is again where I think I'm looking forward to Earthspark and a very different dynamic. But I feel like it is necessary. I feel like it's necessary for reader connection, and I feel like it's necessary to give the story more weight. So we ourselves can kind of imagine how bad this is going to be. Because when it's like, Megatron's going to take over Cybertron, and you're just kind of like, I don't know what it's like to be a Cybertronian. How bad is that? I don't know, like, when I can just transform into a jet and just leave, right? Like, what's the point? But Megatron's going to take over Earth. I can actually imagine how bad that is going to be. So I can actually scale the threat in my mind now. That's an element I think has been missing for a while. I want to see that element back. And while we are putting that element back, for the love of God, Transformers and Autobots are not the enemies of Earth. I'm so sick of this. I'm sick of all these stories where the government doesn't trust any Transformer, where it becomes more like a racist thing than anything. I don't, like, if we can tell on the battlefield friendly combatants from, threatening combatants, whether they're like allied from another country or what, we should be able to tell the difference between Autobot and Decepticon. We should be able to tell the difference between the good guys who are trying to minimize and prevent damage and death versus the ones that are trying to destroy everything and take over the entire place. We should be able to separate the two. I want my heroes to be treated as heroes. If you're gonna involve, like, okay, so I'm American. I'm sorry, but I'm kidding. But like, I am American, so like, in my head, like, the American military should be the good guys. So are the Autobots. The Autobots should be the good guys. So when those two are at odds because we're trying to make the U.S. military and government as this like, like secondary villain, that doesn't work. I mean, it just feels wrong. I don't want to see, I don't want to see Optimus Prime treated like a villain because of a misunderstanding or because of a blanket judgment over all Cybertronians. It just feels wrong. It feels off. Like, I want my heroes to be treated like heroes. This has bugged me for a while. It's bugged me ever since they started doing it in Dark of the Moon, and all the live-action movies since were basically follow the same, like, the army is the enemy, the Autobots thing. The military doesn't care about the difference between Autobot and Decepticon. It's just shoot all on sight. I really don't like it. I hate it, as a matter of fact. You know, and I hated seeing it in IDW 1.0 too. So I want to see that gone. I want everyone who's supposed to be a good guy to be on the same side, and I want my heroes to not be fighting other people who should be heroes. And speaking of connecting Transformers and Earth, how about creating a new way that Cybertron and Earth are connected? Because we always have to kind of figure out some explanation for why all these robots chose our little planet to land on. You know, and there's always something now. Earth, you know, like Earth is actually Unicron. We've pulled that twice now. You know, or like it became a running joke in Transformers Prime. Like all these Cybertronian relics just landed on the planet. How did that happen? You know, we kind of question it in the live action movies too, where all these ancient Transformers just happen to be on Earth. Well, they're both there for the exact same reason. Unicron, Unicron pulled it all there. So yeah, give me something new. Give me something new. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is necessarily, but I would love to see some different connection between Earth and Cybertron we haven't explored before. Maybe Earth is Primus this time, and Cybertron is actually the cast-off. Just something, like not something from a neighboring planet or a large moon that, that got built into Cybertron and floated off to colonize some other location. Maybe. I don't know. But there's plenty of room to work and play with that. And I would love to see something different to explain why all these transforming robots from outer space keep ending up on our ball of water and dirt. And probably the most important one of all, and the one that is probably the least likely to happen of any of these, don't let Hasbro meddle. Don't let them okay, I understand they're trying to sell toys, but if it doesn't work for the story, or if it doesn't make sense, or if it's to the detriment of the story, put your foot down and don't let them change it. IDW 1.0, all these arbitrary body changes for the sake of putting out a toy, Starscream randomly changing into his Armada body for some reason, and then Geaxis following suit with the lamest of excuses. On screen right now, Bumblebee going back to his Earth mode body, even though he was previously in his new Cybertronian body, and it's it's just and it's differently colored for random reasons. And none of these, and then you go to IDW 2.0, like the Speedia 500 from the Walmart Velocitron line is there. It's just there. All of these things that are just given the most loose, random, weak explanations for why they're happening. And we know why. It's because someone at Hasbro knocked on IDW's door and said, you have to put this design in. You have to include this storyline. These characters have to appear because we need to tell stories. Ladies and gentlemen, IDW comic book sales are not all that hot, all right? We're going to be honest here. I don't have sales figures currently because honestly, I don't know exactly where to look them up. A cursory glance showed that in the first half of IDW's running this comic book, they struggled to make 15,000 sales in a single issue, which would actually be a pretty small margin compared to how many toys Hasbro makes of a particular figure. So, is it really promoting a figure? Is it really that worthy of a tie-in if it's reaching such a small base? I can't imagine, especially because a lot of Transformer comic book buyers are adult collectors who are already in the know. It's not the kind of book that kids buy. I would argue that a lot of comic books today aren't bought by kids at all. Because they're not even readily available to kids because they're always relegated to comic book and collector stores, which are always out of a kid's price range. So I don't understand promoting a toy in a book that barely anyone's reading. I don't think it's worth it. I think it's to the detriment of the book, which could, if allowed off its leash, to produce really strong stories and really strong characters who would then translate into high demand for toys. Drift, Nautica, Swerve, Tailgate, all of them and more. I'm just naming a few here. Huge demand toys that now run really high on the aftermarket because the stories were allowed to make them good. That's what I really want out of this. You know, I want the freedom for the artists to just go nuts and do what they want, because I've seen it. Executive meddling ruins so many good comic books. You remember how good the Archie Sonic books used to be until Sega went, no, you have to start adapting the comic. You have to start adapting the video games into your books. Like, no, you can't ship those characters. No, you can't do this and that. It just felt so forced, so artificial, and it took so much of the soul out of what used to be a really daring book that took a lot of chances and got a lot of wins because of it. And I've seen the same thing happen in the Transformer books too, and I don't want to see it happen again. So, that is my wish list. Do you agree with it or not? What do you want the new Transformer books to do? It could be something specific. It could be as small as a character you want to appear, or it could be as major as a storyline you wish they would run. But I am kind of curious. Let me know in the comments below. Hit subscribe and like if you haven't already. Helps the channel out a lot. And I will see you next time. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.